Welcome to the Ditch the Struggle podcast. I'm your host, Alana Rosso. I'm a graphic designer turned career and success coach who knew I could do better, but kept falling short of where I wanted to go. But after years of exploring personal and career development, business, money mindset, and energy work, I'm here to tell you that yes, you can move from stuck and defeated to empowered and confident. Ready to dive in? Awesome. Together, let's ditch the struggle. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I have an episode for you, the graphic designer, today. This is a niche-specific episode. I have been a graphic designer and worked in design for, I think, 652 years at this point. So I feel like I can speak to this subject. And I've been wanting to do this for a little while because along the way, I have learned a ton. I have survived. I have thrived at times. I have tanked at times. But I've been through the ups and downs. I've talked about how this is not necessarily an easy career path, but you can certainly make a great living from it. And I appreciate that I have this skill set because I can take it with me wherever I go. It's still in demand, although I know things are getting crazy out there with AI. I'm not going to be speaking to that at all today. But there's still a need for people that can create and design and problem solve. So I'm going to share my top 10 tips. This will apply to you whether you are a freelancer, an in-house designer, working for an agency, a big company, small company. It doesn't really matter how you're building your career. These tips will apply to it all. You'll hear me toggle between those different roles and what that could look like. But generally, these 10 tips will apply to anybody and everyone who is a graphic designer. So I'm going to dive in right now. Okay, so number one is to be accountable. I know this is groundbreaking information and you're probably yawning already. And I actually joke about this in my ebook that's free on my website called How to Build a Brilliant Career, 6 Insider Tips to Help You Succeed no matter where you are right now. But being accountable is key. There is really no time to be flaky, especially in the design world or any kind of creative profession. And so many people are. And it kind of shocks me to this day how many people are not reliable. And I would say that one of the reasons why I have been able to build a career and have a roster of clients and kind of figure things out and go from job to job and find work is that everyone knows that I've worked with that I am accountable and I will execute and I will do what I say I'm going to do at the time I said I would. So I don't push back deadlines unless there's like extraordinary circumstances, which doesn't happen too often. But you want to be that person that actually shows up and is accountable. I once had a web designer that I hired for a project. Halfway through the project, he's like, "Sia, I'm going whale watching." Listen, I love whales. I would love to go see some whales. But this was shocking, unexpected, unprofessional. Didn't tell me ahead of time. He just didn't think anything of it. He was like, "Yeah, I'm out. I'm going out for a while. See you later." So I've had so many experiences like that. And here's the thing. When you're in a creative profession, people kind of assume you're going to be a little bit flakier. They think you're different, and we kind of are, but they have this assumption that you're just going to be like going where the wind takes you and maybe not as organized. And it's your job to prove them wrong. And I know that kind of feels a bit weird to say that, like you have to prove yourself. But I do feel like the cards are a little stacked against you as a designer and a creative, and you have to just show that you can execute and do what you need to do. And the thing is, with being a designer, it's so much about the actual product you're producing. There is a thing that you're producing, even if it's digital, it's a thing. It's got to go out into the world. So you can't be just like flaky about it. You have to give them what they actually need on time. So my number one recommendation, and this really applies to anybody, is to be accountable. Say what you're going to say. Do what you're going to do when you do it and say it. I don't know. Am I making sense there? But whatever you're going to do it. Whatever you say you're going to do it. You got to execute. That has been huge for me. And when I'm working with designers or hiring someone, I will take someone who is good at their job and accountable versus someone that is amazing, incredible superstar at their job and not accountable. Like, I'm not interested in working with people that aren't going to show up. And I will say companies feel that way. So One thing to really drive home in a job interview, if you are looking for a design role, is that you are accountable. It's a great word to use. And I don't think enough people highlight the fact that they are accountable. In fact, if someone asks me what one of my strengths are in an interview, I have two things that I say. I say accountable and I say resourceful. And I would say that those are two of my top skills. So try and be accountable. Actually, don't try. Just be accountable, do what you're going to do, and execute. And that is going to put you leaps and bounds ahead of other people in your world. Okay, so number 2 is when you're working with a client to state your considerations. Now, I learned this from working at the government job when I did graphic design for the government. And what I mean is that you get a project from a client. So here you get a brief and you're going through it. When you are presenting concepts or presenting your work, you always want to state what your considerations are. Those considerations are what the client asked you to do. So, for example, you're doing your presentation, you have a page in that presentation that actually says considerations, and you are listing in that page on that PowerPoint or that PDF what the client asked for. You are repeating back to the client what you considered in this project. So let's say you're doing a logo for, let's just say, a hair salon. And so you would say considerations, a new modern look for a busy downtown hair salon, a bright color palette based on what the client asked for. You basically, everything that the client has briefed you on, you are repeating back to them that as a consideration, that you are proving to them that you took into account what they asked for before you show them anything. It is so respectful. And this goes, I can't even tell you how far this goes, because what does it mean? It means that you have listened to the client and then the client knows you have listened to them. So if they know you have listened to them and what they're actually asking for, and you're putting it in writing and showing it to them, this is what you've asked for. Yes, here it is. They immediately have their back down when you present the concepts. They're going to relax. They're going to feel respected. They're going to feel heard. It just goes a really long way. So anytime I'm presenting something to a client, I have a slide in the presentation that is called considerations. And in bullet points, I don't do long paragraphs. This is kind of what you're looking for, a new fresh look. It's going to reach this target audience. Whatever the main, I'd say 5 or 6 key points that they're looking for, I will put that in the presentation. I will read it to the client before I get into any kind of creative work. And this I learned, and it goes so far. It has just been an excellent way for me to begin that process of presenting my creative work to a client. Okay, number 3 is you want to really keep your concepts varied. Again, this is going to sound obvious, but what I did in my 20s in my career as a designer is, I'd say one of the biggest mistakes I made, or one of the things I had to learn, was to make my concepts very different. And I would tend to kind of do a similar concept, but just execute it in 3 different ways. So this is partly from lack of experience and kind of just not understanding how far I could push things, but you do not want your concepts to look the same with you don't want the repetition. You do not want to look like you haven't explored things. Yes, you want to hear what the client said, take in consideration their considerations and what they've asked for, but you need to make sure that I usually present 3 concepts, so I'm going to usually talk about doing 3, that they're all different and they look like you've really explored things. And now, of course, you want to make sure that everything you present is something that you actually like, because Murphy's Law is you're going to end up executing the one concept that you didn't love. And if you're working on something that's going to last for years, then that really, really sucks. So make sure you're presenting stuff that you're comfortable with. But inevitably, you're going to have ones that are favorites, right? But you have to make sure they're different. I'd say, again, that was something I did not too well at the beginning of my career. And I would get feedback, especially when I did freelance and agencies. It's yeah, these are all kind of similar. You do not want a client to be saying to you that these concepts are similar. You need to hit what they're looking for. You can't be going, well, I'm going to talk about this. You can't really be going too off the path, except in a calculated way, which I'm going to get to shortly. But you want to make sure that they see that you've done exploration. So obviously, the basics, this concept has a sans serif font. This one has a serif font. This one's got bolder colors, more pastel. Whatever it is, they need to look different because the client will appreciate it. They will now see you as someone who has done the exploration necessary, that you weren't being lazy about things, because when concepts are very similar, it can come across as you being lazy, even though you may be really honed in. I think this is what would happen to me. I would be honed in on a concept that I think worked. So I would be really married to it. So I need you to divorce your concepts in a way, so detach from it a little bit so that you're not as emotionally invested and be like, I really want this number one concept, so I'm just going to do slight variations of this. No, you want to really push yourself. This gets easier as you go through your career because you're going to have done so many concepts that got trashed and they just fell by the wayside, but they're never really gone. I can't tell you how many things I've revived, like design elements I've done from 10 years ago. I pull those out. Like I recently did a project and I was like, okay, I was really pressed for time. I'm going through the archives of what I've done in old years. I was like, okay, I liked this color palette. Oh, you know what? There was that font that I really loved that I never actually got to use. I will pull from the archive. So don't be afraid to do that. And do not be afraid to do really radically different concepts, as long as, again, they're still going back and hitting the considerations of the client. Okay, number 4 is do your 3 concepts, yes, that I just spoke about, keep them varied, but add in a 4th wild card. So I love to do this. So again, I generally do 3 concepts. Usually a client can't get their head around more than 3 concepts. And I very specifically, in a quote for a client, I include 3 concepts as part of the initial design process. I do not promise them 4 concepts. I say 3. So my 4th one is a wild card that I usually throw in. And this goes over so well. In fact, I talk about this process in job interviews because it just goes over so well. So what I do is I do my 3 concepts. They're varied. I make sure that I'm pretty happy with all of them. But then I will challenge myself to throw in a 4th wild card that is really not what they asked for or very different from what they asked for, but I think could still work. So by the time I've done 3 concepts, I've, done a chunk of work and I've kind of really gotten into it. Sidebar, I really hate doing the first concept. I get so stressed out. I don't relax into a project until number 1 concept is done. And I feel like even if I don't love it, once it's done, then I get to chill out and then I kind of enjoy the process. But I actually hate the initial design process. Most people love it, the exploration. I actually don't. I like getting more into the execution. But anyway, once I got my 3 concepts, I feel good about it. I will challenge myself to do something totally, completely different. So I'll present to the client. I'll be like, you know what, here's all you asked for. But then I also had this idea. Now, there are times where I keep it in my back pocket where I don't present it if I feel like I'm really hitting things and I don't need to. I'll make that decision sometimes in the presentation. But I generally like to have a 4th one. But here's the extra layer of challenge that I set for myself to do this wild card. I try to spend only 1 hour on this wild card. So that's partly to respect my time because I've, done a quote and set the scope for 3 concepts. And I don't want to be totally spending all of my time on this project and kind of wasting my time. But I do like to over-deliver, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but in a very calculated way that's still respectful of my time and that's kind of more fun. And for me, setting this 1 hour timer almost, be like, okay, got everything done. What's one thing that I could try here? And if you're really stuck, you could take one of your existing concepts, but just maybe give it a totally different color palette. I've done that before, and that's gone over well because they may have asked for something all pastel, but you know what? Let's just try this crazy primary color scheme, whatever it is, or black and white, something again that is totally different and unexpected. So I do love this unexpected piece. And as I said, I have talked about this in job interviews. It's like, I love to deliver concepts. I love to deliver what you're asking for, but I do love to throw in a wild card sometimes. It's calculated. I'm not just going crazy and just, well, sometimes they're a bit more random, but I'm always making sure that it's still in alignment with what the client has asked for. And again, that's making sure, number two, that I've taken into account what the considerations are. But I really encourage you to try a wild card and give yourself a really small window of time to do it so that you're not exhausting yourself, you're not depleting yourself, and also you're still making money on the job. You don't want to be like thinking something's going to take you 20 hours and then suddenly spending 30, right? So make sure that it's just thoughtful how you're doing it. But this generally goes over really, really well with clients. Okay, number 5 is name your concepts creatively. Now, I am not taking any credit for this point. I learned this from Deb Peterson, who was my boss for 5 years when I worked at Harlequin in the book industry. One of my favorite bosses ever. I've had 2 bosses that really stood out, and Deb is one of them. Now, I heard her speak at a conference. I think it was the In-House Design Conference that was held by the Association of Registered Graphic Designers in 2019. So 6 years ago or so. And I heard her speak, and she was talking about how to present to a client. And this really stood out to me, and I've been doing it ever since. So instead of presenting your, let's say, 3 concepts, or with your 4th maybe wild card in there, instead of calling them concept 1, concept 2, concept 3, Deb was like, give them a creative name. So I'm just going to throw out some names here. Like, you could call one Downtown Chic, and then number 2 is Forest Escape. I did a concept for a client. They were kind of older, so I knew that they would get this reference. I called it Jewel of the Style instead of like Jewel of the Nile, which was a movie like from the 80s. They thought this was hilarious. So you get creative with how you name them. You're setting the tone. It's like, when you go buy paint chips and they're like, it's like gray, but they call it, I was looking at paint chips yesterday. It was called Iron Mountain, right? So it's like, or it's like Greyhound Gray or whatever it is. It's more interesting. And you pick up the paint chip and you kind of like, I'm going for this like Starlight Rose or whatever. So this goes over really well with clients. I've done it ever since. It's very fun to do. I do it at the very end. I just kind of think of like fun names. And yeah, it's so simple. And this one, highly recommend. So name your concepts creatively. It's also going to make you look even more creative, more thoughtful, and just different. I think it's going to set you apart from other designers as well. Okay, number 6, we're going to have to get into acceptance mode here, is that you have to accept that the client will blend concepts together. I know you don't want to hear this. And again, when you're in the beginning of your career, you're in 20s, that's kind of how I picture it. You do these concepts and you're like, this is this one, this is this one, this is this one. And none of them should mix or mingle because they're specific and you've thought them through. And I know you've been so thoughtful about it because every designer is so thoughtful. But the reality is that the client is definitely going to want to blend concepts together. So they're going to say, you know what, I love the colors from concept 2, but I love the font in concept 3. And you know what, I love the photography from concept 1. And I love what you did in this wild card. And can we, take this graphic from that? So it's really annoying because you've thought things through. You've been just very specific and strategic. But you know what? Get over it. You just have to get over it because it's going to happen. So now what I do, first of all, I don't care. I don't really take much personally. And I also talk about this in job interviews. I really don't take it personally when I get my designs criticized because sometimes they're totally right. Sometimes I know I didn't nail it, or it just comes down to personal preference, right? It's very, very subjective. But I have accepted that they are going to mishmash and Frankenstein my concepts. I want to control how I'm doing it. So I actually speak to this now when I present it. I was like, we can really take the colors, like the color scheme from this would work with concept 2. Like I get preemptive about it and I will actually suggest it at this point because I'm designing actually with the idea in mind that this will all get mashed together. And maybe that's not great advice. Maybe I shouldn't be thinking that way, but it's just been decades of experience that they're going to do this. So I will look at everything I've done and I'll be like, okay, I can see them liking this from number 1, this from number 2, this from number 3. And I will mentally piece things together of how I could actually make that work. And here's something else you might not want to hear or learn. Sometimes they're right. Like you think, oh, that could never work. It would look absolutely hideous. And then you do it and you're like, you know what? This isn't so bad. It's not so bad, actually. And it's your job to make it work. Like that is your job to make it visually work and sometimes come together. Sometimes it's really hard. Like I had a project recently. I really was starting to push back. I was like, this is two concepts that are so vastly different. And we're trying to mush them together and it's not really working. So I will say that. But I also have to respect the fact that they're not necessarily seeing what I'm seeing. Everyone has different tastes, different opinions, all of that stuff. So I just accept it and I don't really get my knickers in a twist about it. And I really recommend that if you can just get over that and actually plan for it and think about how you could change things around or take the pieces apart and put them back together in different ways before you even present them, that's going to be highly valuable. And I think your client's going to appreciate that. Okay, number 7, you have to adopt the belief that there are no limits to ideas and concepts. Ideas, creativity is limitless. You're not always going to feel that way. You're going to have days where you feel stuck. I know I hadn't done any graphic design in a while because I was so heavily doing coaching for a bit. I kind of vacillate between what's taking up more of my time. And I hadn't done any graphic design very much in a chunk of time at one point about a year ago. And I had a project and oh my gosh, I really very rarely get creatively stuck because I truly have adopted this belief that there's just no limits to ideas. Like how can you run out of ideas? But I was rusty. I was just simply rusty and it took me a while to get back into it. I was frustrated. I didn't really enjoy it, especially doing that first concept. The whole thing was kind of painful for me. But truly, I have learned that you can't run out of ideas, that, what do they call it? Like writer's block, creative block. I try not to subscribe to that idea. I can go through phases where I'm not feeling as creative, usually because I'm probably working too hard, sleep deprived, not getting into nature enough, not hanging out with my trees, which you know I love, not doing enough like baking or just creative things, small things that I really enjoy doing. But you have to adopt this belief that there's no limits to your ideas and concepts. Like it's just infinite. It's like the ocean, it's infinite. I did not have this belief. I'm going to keep going back to my 20s, probably some of my 30s as well. I feel like that good first 10 years of my career, I talked about this a lot, as a shit show. Felt shitty about myself. And I really didn't have a lot of confidence. So here's the thing. When you don't have a lot of confidence, your creativity is stunted. Ideas don't come to you as easily. And you're like, oh, but if my ideas just came to me and I was a better designer and I was more creative, I would feel more confident. It doesn't work that way. You have to build yourself up before your portfolio can reflect what you're feeling and how you want to be. So it's that idea of not the fake it till you make it, but the fake it till you become it, which is Amy Cuddy talks about that in her pretty famous TED Talk. I reference that quite a bit. You have to start feeling confident in yourself and then the ideas flow. So you might want to go back to my episode. I have an episode 5 tips for building confidence, which I really try and adhere to and have really helped me. You just have to adopt this belief. Now, it could be just telling yourself this over and over. It can be taking breaks when you're creatively frustrated, doing what you need to do to get the ideas flowing. So for me, it's actually taking breaks. And a lot of my ideas come to me while I'm literally watching the kettle boil making tea because I drink ridiculous amounts of tea. People say they get their ideas in the shower because your brain is going into a different brainwave, like a different state. So you're getting out of beta, which is work, and then you're getting more into like a theta or alpha state. So the ideas can come to you, but you have to decide that there's no limits to concepts and ideas. You have to make that decision, and then you will build the belief based on that. So that is something that I have decided. Like, I don't really believe myself when I'm stuck. I'm like, okay, this is a temporary thing. But of course there's ideas. Of course there's a solution. Of course there's something I can do. Yes, most things have been done before, but I'm going to put my own twist on it. So you got to get into that belief. It is absolutely crucial and invaluable to you as a designer in any kind of creative profession. And if you're not feeling creative, if you're stuck, then it's your job to get unstuck and to do what really just find things that bring you joy and make you feel happy. And then you're going to allow the creativity to come back in, I promise you. Okay, number 8, I'm absolutely a believer in, valuing your time and not giving everything away for free. However, number 8 is throw something else in for no charge. So let's say you're doing a project for a client. This is maybe more if you're a freelancer, but what I'm saying is over deliver. So even if you're working in-house somewhere or working at a company, they've asked for a certain amount of scope or a certain amount of assets. A lot of what we do is like based on assets. You need to give a certain amount of deliverables. I love to throw something in for no charge. It is small, okay? I'm not like, here's a website for no charge. No. It is something that usually takes me less than 1 hour or less, okay? So I'm into this 1 hour or less. It is me going above and beyond. I'll give you examples in a second. They didn't ask for it, but I think it could be helpful because part of my job is to anticipate their needs. And because I've done this so long, like the longer I do this, the more I know what they're actually going to need. So they sometimes don't know what to ask for unless I've been working with them for a really long time. But for some examples I might do a quick one-page style guide. So clients love style guides. Like, here's just a sheet with all the colors I've used in CMYK, RGB, and web breakdown, the fonts I've used, like a quick one-page style sheet. Love doing those. Some social media templates or graphics, those go over really well. Here's some stories graphics. You can just throw like lots of blank space so you can still throw in your copy, but the logo's in there, something. Those go over really well. Something that's just simple, an email signature. If let's say you've done a new branding project for someone like a small company, anything that you can think of that you know would be helpful, and do it for free and just send it along towards the end of the project. They love this. Going above and beyond. Again, you're like working against all those flaky people out there who actually aren't accountable. But the trick here is to make sure it's something simple, doable. It's not taking a huge amount of time. But listen, it doesn't matter what you do. Going above and beyond is always helpful. I love that. We had an arborist here, like a team. We had so many trees to get cut. And I asked a favor at the end. I was like, and they're like, yeah, we'll just do that. No charge, no problem. I was like, thank you. Thank you so much. And at one point they suggested, you know what, this needs to be done. We're just going to do it for you. I was like, thank you so much for anticipating what I need, or I didn't know to ask you to do that. It just goes over so well. And again, just make it short and sweet. And that is definitely going to set you apart from other designers. Okay, number 9 is specifically for print projects. And this is, everyone who's ever worked with me knows I live by this. So do not send artwork to print on a Friday. Absolutely not. I hate it. The times you do after a really long week, especially if you're pushing for a deadline, there's going to be mistakes. Yes, sometimes things are going into production on a weekend because, a lot of printers work 24/7, and I've had to do it. But especially when I was at my cosmetics job, this was like everyone knew. It's like, no, we're not sending artwork. Alana's not going to want it out today. It has to be looked at on Monday with fresh eyes. The fresh eyes has to happen. People need to have not looked at it for a couple days, look at it again, triple, quadruple check everything, especially because huge budgets were involved or there was no room for error. But I don't care what you do, how small the project. If you can avoid sending something to print on a Friday, please do. I guarantee you it's going to be better on the Monday. Again, unless you really, really have to, it's something super urgent. But I have just said straight up to clients, you know what, if we can send it Monday, that'd be great. I'd really like to just take a look at it one more time after a couple days of not looking at it. I'm just fully transparent. So when possible, do not send artwork to print on a Friday. Have fresh eyes on the Monday. I'm telling you, it's going to save you so much pain long term. And I've just made that kind of a policy. Everyone who works with me kind of knows, we're not sending stuff to print on a Friday. It's not especially how long the weeks are sometimes and how hard we work. And the other thing about being a graphic designer is that sometimes you're the worst person to proof things because you've been looking at it for hours and hours and hours, right? So not only do you have to get other people to look at it, but I do think you need to have a break and not look at it. And then suddenly you'll look at it again and you're like, oh my God, how did I not see that? Well, you didn't see it because you're freaking exhausted. That's why. So send it on the Monday. Okay, number 10 applies to anybody. And this really ties in also to not being flaky, to being accountable. That is to be consistent with your communication. And I feel like that's a LinkedIn post, a really boring LinkedIn post. Pretty well everyone says that. But A lot of people are not great at communication. I can't tell you how many. I have friends that have hired me to do jobs. I will never work with them again because their communication is so cryptic, weird. I never understand what they're saying. I sometimes sit at their emails and I will literally look at them for like 10 minutes trying to decipher what they're saying. Like I'll be like, okay, I need to like turn into my psychic ability here to like figure out what the F they're talking about. And then there's people that some of them do email, then they're texting me. It's like, first of all, I like all my design communication just goes through email. I don't want to be doing text with that. It's just hot mess. So some people can't communicate, let's just say that. But being consistent with your communication. And what really drove home this point to me is I once was on a webinar, maybe like 4 years ago. The person did like data research or like, I don't remember how I ended up on this webinar. But anyway, she said something that has always stayed with me. And that is, no update is an update. So let's say you're working on a project. You're waiting for, let's say, images to come in from a photographer. So there's really nothing going on. You can still email the client and say, hey, I'm just waiting for the photographs. They still haven't come in yet. They're coming in apparently Friday. So I just want to let you know. And we're moving forward with our schedule as planned. So there's not really much of an update there, but the no update is an update. And I was like, this is so genius. First of all, people like over communication. I would say, especially in the design world, you kind of have to hold their hand with a lot of clients. And especially if they're an anxious client, or they're like a little bit more high maintenance, that they just need more guidance, or some of them need a lot of reassurance. So if you're an intuitive person, you tend to know this. Like I can figure out a client within like 10 minutes of talking with them, like what they're going to need. That's definitely something I think comes really easily to me. But I really do try and be consistent with my communication, but I've now kind of leaned into over communication. If something is even an hour late, I will let them know. Generally, that doesn't happen. But if something comes up, or even if literally nothing comes up, just let them know. Just be like, hey, things are on track. Have a great weekend. We're chatting Tuesday. So they just want to know you're around. They want to know you're alive. And I think this like world of everything being digital, especially things on Zoom or working remotely, I do think you have to over communicate. I think that under communicating is just a huge red flag. And I think it is not a good idea right now. I just think this is the time to really reassure people. I feel like people's nerves are just like through the roof. So remember that no update is an update. Be really consistent with your communication. That is also going to set you apart from other designers. And I'm saying all of these points as someone who has seen the exact opposite. So these are things that I try and live by and I try and do. And I see all of the opposite because I've worked with literally hundreds of designers at this point, maybe even thousands. I'm not sure. Maybe I think probably hundreds. And most of them are not doing this. And what do I like to say? Don't do what most people do. Most people are not accountable. Most people do similar concepts. Most people are just like getting their back up about what kind of concepts or how we're blending them together. Most people are really uptight about, you want to be uptight about your scope, but you also want to have some flexibility. So like most people are difficult to work with is the bottom line. You want to be easy to work with and you want to try and incorporate some of these tips, I think, and you want to do what most people are not doing. I think that's a secret to success in any kind of career, but especially if you're in a creative one. So I hope these tips have helped you. If there's anything you want to ask me about design, feel free to message me on Instagram or anything because this is a world I know. And I know things are changing out there and I know what it's like to have the pressure of being creative 24/7. So let's try and incorporate even just one or two of these tips in your design career. And I would love to hear how it goes. Take care, guys. Thank you for joining me today on Ditch the Struggle. You showing up here means so, so much to me. To dig deeper into the topics discussed today and to learn about my work, visit alanarosa.com. And don't forget to download your free resources while you're there. And if this episode resonated with you, please share with others who also want to ditch the struggle. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating and a review, and let me know what you'd like to see more of on this podcast. And before I go, I want to leave you with my 3 favorite ways to ditch the struggle. Be your own best advocate, take baby steps for the win, and forget about a linear career path. It's overrated and you are doing just fine. See you next time.